Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishna Yoma, Parag Zayin, Chapter 7, Mishna Hey, Mishna 5. Before we begin, today's learning is sponsored by Arthur Rubenstein to commemorate the yahrzeit of his mother, Tzivia Bas Isser, which will be observed tomorrow on Shabbos. The Shabbos Shavan Aliyah.
Amen.
Okay. Kohen Gadol Meshamash B'Shmayna Kalim. The Kohen Gadol serves in the Beis HaMikdash wearing 8 garments. Here the word kalim, which sometimes we typically translate as utensils or vessels, here it means garments. Kohen Gadol serves with 8 garments. V'hedyoit ba'arba. An ordinary kohen wears 4. What are those 4? So I'm just going to read it and then we'll explain them. Bekutainis, which they translate as a tunic. Umechnasayim, pants. Umitznefes, a turban. Va'avnate, and a belt. Moisef alav Kohen Gadol, the Kohen Gadol in addition wears choshen, a breastplate. Ve'ephod, an apron. Ume'il, which they translate as a robe. We'll see what that means soon. V'tzitz, and a headplate. All right, so now let's go through each one. And we have a picture on here, on this page. May be helpful. Okay, now this is the Kohen Hedget. This is the ordinary Kohen. Okay, so he's got 4 garments. He's got the mitznefes. He's got the turban. Okay, he's got the tunic, which will explain what that means soon, but that's that outer garment, so to speak. He's got the avnate, the belt, the sash, maybe you want to call it. And below and under the tunic, he has the mekhnasayim, the trousers. Okay, so now let me read to you how each one is explained. So the first thing mentioned is the kutainis, which they translate as a tunic. All right, what's a tunic? So they explain the tunic went from the Kohen's neck to just above his heels. That's one long garment with sleeves that reach the palms of his hands. Okay, so it's basically this big. You put it over you. It's not a robe. You have buttons or zippers. It's one solid thing, like a, I don't know what to call it exactly, like a gown, right? And you go ahead and he puts it over his head, and it goes from his neck all the way down to his heels, and there's sleeves that reach to the palms of his hands, a little bit on the lower, they go down more. All right, that's the kutainis. That is the tunic. Next is the mechnasayim, the trousers. The trousers went from above the kohen's navel to his knees. They were basically like briefs. Okay. And then you have the next thing is the mitznefes. That was the turban. Showed you that picture of that before. The avnate and the belt. Showed you the picture of that before. Those are the 4 things the Kohen Hedge, the ordinary Kohen, wears. In addition, the Kohen Gadol wears a choshen, a breastplate. Now we think a breastplate is like this hard breastplate like we have in a Torah, but it wasn't that way. The choshen was a cloth, a thick cloth, but it's made of cloth, folded in 2 that the Kohen Gadol wore on his chest, being held in place there by shoulder straps of the ephod being the apron. So in this picture, right, this is the choshen. Okay, you see, and it has these cords that are going onto something on his shoulder, on these settings in the shoulder that connect back to straps onto the ephod, the apron, which you only see the front part of it here. And as continued, 12 precious stones were attached to its visible side, on which the names of the 12 tribes were engraved, one name on each stone, as well as the names of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and the words Shiftei Ka, the tribes of Hashem. So again, you're not going to see them in this picture. You have 12 stones. Each stone has the name of a tribe, plus along the stones, you also had Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and you also had the words Shiftei Ka. How exactly that was spread out, we're not going to get into that right now. All right. So that is the choshen. What is the ephod? Now, in the picture in the ephod, all you really see of the ephod in this picture, which is the front of the Kohen Gadol, is you see the front of it, what's in the front and tied in the front. It was mostly in the back. It covered his back, kind of the apron that you wore backwards. We wore an apron with the closed side in front. He wore the apron with the closed side, with the solid side in the back, and the open side coming up a little bit in the front of each side and tied in the front. That's what the ephod was. Now, it covered his lower back. Let me read it. The ephod was an apron-like garment that went behind the Kohen Gadol and was belted in front of him. It covered his lower back and the backs of his legs down to his heels, and it wrapped around him to cover him partially in front. 2 straps were attached to the belt in the back that went up his back over his shoulders. A precious stone was attached to each strap at the shoulder, on which the names of the 12 tribes were engraved, 6 on one stone and 6 on the other. So that's what he had. Shoulder straps coming up from the back onto his shoulders. You had these precious stones that were then set into, the straps were set into, and each stone had 6 names of the tribes of the Jewish people. All right, that is the ephod. What's the me'il? Then what's the me'il? Now, I'll read to you how they explain the me'il. The me'il was a long robe that the Kohen Gadol wore on top of his standard tunic and belt. Okay, 72 pomegranates, balls of colored wool, and 72 bells hung along the hem of the me'il, alternating one with the other. The me'il was worn under the ephod. All right. Now, in this picture here, in this picture, I cannot tell, but it seems to me from this picture that this me'il, what they call the robe was worn on top of the tunic and under the ephod, which means, and this picture I think lends itself to it, it would seem from this picture that the Kohen Gadol wore the same thing twice. He had the ketonas under, and then on top of it, he had what seems to be the exact same thing that was called the me'il. And the ephod was on top of the me'il. The ephod was on top of the me'il. That's what it seems from this picture and from the description. Meaning it sounds like both of them had sleeves. So it seems like, unless I'm making a mistake, but it seems like that, at least from the picture. All right, now, and then the last thing mentioned after that was the tzitz, the head plate. The tzitz was a gold plate that the Kohen Gadol wore on his forehead with the words Kodesh, Holy to Hashem on it. It was held in place by strings tied behind his head. So in this picture, not so easy to see, but this is the tzitz, the head plate, right? And you see that they have these strings that are coming out of it that attach to the back of his head, that are tied to the back of his head. That's how he wore the tzitz. So these are the 8 garments of the Kohen Gadol. The Mishnah concludes, "Ba'elu nish'alin burim v'tumim." With these, meaning when the Kohen Gadol wears these 8 garments, the Urim v'tumim would be asked. What does that mean? Okay, the Urim v'tumim, first of all, we have to explain what the Urim v'tumim was. When the Urim v'tumim was in place, leaders of the Jewish people could receive answers from heaven to important questions that affected the nation. Where is their explanation? I'm missing here the explanation. Oh, here it is. The Urim v'tumim is a piece of parchment inserted in the fold of the choshen, of the breastplate, which the unutterable name of God was written. Name of Hashem that cannot be pronounced was written. It was not Yud K Vav K. It was a different name. Though the Urim v'tumim, through the v'tumim, heaven would give answers to questions of national import. Okay, so now, when the Urim v'tumim was in place, leader of the Jewish people could receive answers from heaven to important questions that affected the nation. So how is this done? The questioner faced the Kohen Gadol, and the Kohen Gadol faced the ark. That means the questioner is facing the back of the Kohen Gadol. After the questioner asked his question in a low voice, the questioner asked. He didn't say it out loud, and he didn't just think it. He said it in a low voice. So when the questioner would ask the questions in a low voice, okay, so I'm going to stop here. So the questioner asked the question, and the answer appeared where? In the letters of the choshen. How did it appear in the letters? How did it appear in the letters?
They lit up.
They lit up, you say, huh?
It was a battery.
You say they it lit up. Well, you know what? I always thought it lit up also, and I'm just going to read to you here from the way they have it here in the notes.
Right.
After the questioner asked his question in a low voice, some of the letters engraved on the stones of the Choshen protruded.
Right.
Seems like they came out. The Choshen's letters included the entire aleph base. The whole Hebrew alphabet was on them. With the help of divine inspiration, with Ruach HaKodesh, the Kohen Gadol arranged the protruding letters so they provided an answer to the question. The letters came out where they were, right? They didn't spell out the answer necessarily. The letters weren't in order. The letters where they were, they came out. They still had to be arranged to figure out what the message was. The arrangement had to happen through the Ruach HaKodesh, the spirit of holiness, divine inspiration that came upon him to enable him to figure out from the letters what the message was. Okay, so that's how it worked. Now the Mishnah says, "Ve'ein nish'alin," and the Urim and Thummim was only asked, "Elul HaMelech," only questions from the king, right? It's only asked to the king, Ula Beis Din, and for the court, which means the Sanhedrin, the highest court, Ulami Shatzibur Tzarech Bai, and to whom the congregation has a need for, someone needed by the public. Who's that? Who's needed by the public? We have the king, we have the Sanhedrin. Then we have someone needed by the public. Who's that?
It was the Kohen from the wall.
Good.
Oh.
A Kohen was appointed to address the army before he went into battle.
Yeah.
Okay. Since he, like the king and the great court, had to make decisions that affected the entire Jewish people, he received guidance from the Urim B'Tumim. So apparently this Kohen, besides giving, a kind of a pep talk, right, seemed to need to make decisions also. I mean, I didn't, when you read it in the Chumash, I didn't have that sense that he is kind of, so to speak, leading the battle. But apparently he had decisions to make that affected the entire Jewish people, which I would assume means in war. And if needed, he could go ahead and ask the Urim B'Tumim a question. There's one person missing here, the way it seems to me. We have the king, we have the Sanhedrin, we have the Kohen who goes out to war. There seems to be one person missing here.
Kohen Gadol.
Kohen Gadol. No, I mean, why wouldn't there's no mention specifically about him, right? And we say that the word to whom the tzibur has a need doesn't mean, they're not referring to the Kohen Gadol, it's referring to another Kohen. So what happened to the Kohen Gadol? I don't know. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.
That's it.
I think it said that the